Hello and welcome to Tale Doc. The story you are about to hear is true. How do I know this? Well, because it happened to my son. This is the first story in a series for you, the listener. So sit back and relax and immerse yourself in a tale that reaches beyond the boundaries between our world and the world beyond. My son was in his second or third year of college. He was studying for a major in psychology with a minor in paratechnology on his way to becoming a licensed paramedic. Although he was a full-time student, he landed a position with an ambulance service working primarily at night 2 or 3 times a week. He was under quite a workload, but seemed to be handling it well. He was proficient at multitasking, so my wife and I didn't worry much about him. We have always had a close relationship with him and knew that if he had any issues, he would come to us for advice. He was still living at home, and the college he attended was only 20 minutes away. There were no dorm expenses, which helped with the cost and kept him away from the temptations and distractions that come with college life. He could devote more time to studies and work. Before I get to the actual event, however, I need to backtrack for a moment and tell you several things that I believe played a role in the incident ahead. While he was still in high school, the Travel Channel was alive with multiple paranormal investigation programs that he was fascinated by and naturally intrigued with being young. I must admit that I, as well, have always been intrigued by the paranormal, though my Christian upbringing has kept me from taking the plunge and pursuing the act of physically involving myself with it. I warned my son early on as well that this is not something to play with. I didn't know it at the time, but my warning fell on deaf ears, and he and his friends eventually began exploring abandoned properties and farms with some cheap recorders, trying to capture EVPs or video evidence of possible paranormal phenomena. Once he started college, however, all of this seemed to wane, as he never had the extra time for much more than studies and work. Additionally, we have a long history in my family of spiritual sensitivity by the way of spiritual dreams and prophecy. Both of my parents had spiritual dreams on occasion that came to fruition exactly the way they were shown in these dreams. My father-in-law as well had many strange dreams throughout his life that were otherworldly, for lack of a better term, and many of those came true as well. I tell you all of this because it appears that my son was blessed with a double dose of spiritual sensitivity and has had so many strange dreams that I eventually began to keep a journal, recording them as he told them to me over the course of his teenage life. The internet is rife with information on dreams, both good and bad. Some individuals, for whatever reason, when they reach that sleep state, suspended somewhere between realities, are able to tap into something unexplained. Something that science has spent exhaustive amounts of time and monetary resources trying to understand and harness. Do a search sometime on remote viewing, for example, and you'll never reach the bottom of that topic. There are occasions, however, when one must wonder if the door that was opened was ever meant to be walked through. This is a reckoning of one of those particular dreams, if in fact it was a dream. My son came downstairs this one particular Saturday morning, favoring his hip. And as he walked past me, I said, "Are you okay?" He gave me a puzzled look and said, "Dad, I need to tell you something." Now, if you're a parent, you know automatically that when your child says this, it's almost always bad. I sat back in my chair at the table and said, "Sure, what's up? Is everything all right?" He said, "I had another crazy dream, but this time it was different." "Different how?" I asked. He answered, "I went to bed last night and I dreamed that I heard what sounded like small rocks hitting my window repeatedly. After the third or fourth one, I climbed out of bed and pulled the curtains back to see what was going on." We live in a 2-story home, by the way, and my son's bedroom faces the backyard. We live on 11 acres in the river bottoms of rural northeastern Oklahoma. It's very heavily wooded and very creepy back there at night. My property butts against a cattle ranch that is hundreds of acres in size. So naturally, we have abundant wildlife of almost everything nature has to offer for this part of the country. I could list each type of wildlife, but it's easier to point out that the only type we have not seen up until this point has been a black bear. It's also worth mentioning that although we have no American heritage in our bloodline, our property, like much of Oklahoma, was most likely once inhabited by members of the Cherokee tribe, as we occasionally find arrowheads along the banks of Otter Creek, which runs across our property on its way to the Verdigris River a mile away. My son continued, "When I pulled the curtain back, there was a 3-foot-tall rabbit standing in the yard motioning for me to come outside. I could not believe what I was seeing, so I hurriedly put on my jeans and snuck down the stairs and out the back door to where the rabbit was standing, just beyond the porch. He whispered to me not to be afraid and that he needed a favor from me. I stood there a moment looking him up and down, trying to size him up. He gave me a weird half smile and twitched his ears. I asked him what it was that he needed me to do, and he pointed to the big tree beside the shop. And then he said, "I need you to retrieve a bag for me that is hanging in that tree." I looked over at the tree, but the foliage was so thick that I couldn't see much. So we walked over to the base of the tree and I again looked up into the mass of branches, straining to see anything. I felt a little uneasy, but I obliged him and climbed onto the roof of the shop. From the edge of the roof, I could reach out and just touch the trunk, but the first limb was beyond my reach. So I had to jump to grab it. And from there I was able to navigate up through the maze of limbs. He whispered to me again saying, "It's up in the top where that highest fork is." It took some work to get up to where he was pointing, but sure enough, there was a canvas rucksack in the tree. I remember it had a long leather strap on it and a leather strap and buckle on the front. It looked old and worn, and it smelled like the inside of an old barn or something. I grabbed the bag and slung the strap over my head and slid my way down and out of the tree and hopped back onto the roof of the shop. He clapped his hands together, and I dropped the bag down to him and jumped off the roof. He set the bag down and was rummaging through it, quietly giggling to himself and humming. I couldn't see what the actual contents were, but whatever was in the bag made jingling sounds like it possibly held coins or something. He stood up and slung the bag over his shoulder, smiled and winked at me and said, "I'll return the favor someday when you least expect it." Then he said, "See you, kid," and he bounded away into the deep woods towards the back of the property. I sat there dumbfounded for a minute, trying to get my head around what I just heard. Not knowing what else to say, I said, "Son, that was quite a dream." And he said, "Yes, it was, but that's not all. I woke up this morning with this pain in my hip. My jeans are dirty, and look, so are my feet." The hair on the back of my neck was standing at attention, and I had goosebumps. My parental intuitions started to kick in as I sat there, playing the story back in my mind. Is my child suffering from some psychotic episode? Obviously not, judging by how coherent he is, and the sheer detail that he shared from this supposed dream is nothing short of amazing. There's no explanation for what happened, or proof, other than the dirty jeans, the muddy feet, and an injured hip. I sat there a moment in a daze, trying to rationalize it, when he spoke up and said, "Well, what do you think?" "I don't know, son," I said. "Do you think you were just sleepwalking?" And he immediately said, "No, Dad, I think it really happened." Then he peeled off his shirt and revealed to me the scratches and dirt on his chest and arms, most likely from shimmying up the tree and back down again. I could not believe what I was seeing. Tears welled up in my eyes, not from sadness, but from fright or anxiety. Has anyone in your life ever told you something so frightful or bizarre that you actually got goosebumps just listening to it? Well, this was one of those times for me. Vampires and werewolves are stories that can be rationalized for the most part as make-believe or fiction. This did not fit the gamut of fictitious tales told around a campfire. This was something otherworldly and disturbing. How could he be so deep in sleep that he could accomplish such a feat without being coherent? Oh, this definitely takes the prize for most weird when compared to his other dreams, which were many. This was bordering on the demonic. He has never, to my knowledge, had issues with sleepwalking, and he's not on drugs, so I did not know what to make of this. Had his toying with the paranormal caused some sort of attachment to the spirit realm or opened a portal to that realm? Or was he simply sleepwalking? What did the rabbit signify? What was actually in the bag that made the rabbit giggle with delight? And most of all, why my son? I couldn't answer any of these questions, so I decided to do some research on dreams that involve seeing or talking to a rabbit. There are mixed opinions on this, but most cultures view rabbits as a good omen, signaling prosperity and fertility. There is, however, an entity from the history of the Cherokee tribe known as the trickster, a gray rabbit known to delve in mischief. I asked my son what color the rabbit was, and as you can probably guess, he was gray. But in this dream, the rabbit wanted only a favor with a promise to return a favor someday. So I'm not sure that would fit the proper description for mischief, other than the fact that he asked my son to risk his life climbing a tree in the middle of the night, or the fact that he winked and clicked his tongue before he took off. I think I can only file this away for now as a currently unsolved mystery. Did he truly have a paranormal encounter with something otherworldly? I can't answer that. But what I do know is this. This event did happen. I believe my son, whether asleep or awake, climbed onto my shop and into a tree, retrieved or thought he retrieved a canvas satchel, and then jumped off the roof of my shop, injuring his hip exactly the way he described. He's never lied to me that I'm aware of, and had no reason to do so at this time. Crazy as this story sounds, it carries with it amazement and wonder and a form of horror. I can scarcely allow myself to dwell on the thought that it may have been a real event. What if things like this really exist? What if there is a barrier that can be breached at times, revealing another world? Would we be able to comprehend it? I can't answer this question, and to be honest, I'm not sure I want to know the answer. There's more ahead. We're just getting started, so stick around and tune in for more.